Welcome back to Scar Stories, everybody. My name is Nicole Golden. I am the host of this podcast. And today I have my friend Shelbie here. And I am so excited because we're going to be talking about something that's a little bit tricky, a little bit difficult. So I want to preface this with there will be quite a few trigger warnings throughout this conversation because we're going to talk about eating disorders and very sensitive. And I'm actually kind of looking forward to this in a weird way. It's so funny. Like I pick these like dark topics and I'm like, I'm so looking forward because I feel like this is kind of like my conversation with Hope a couple weeks ago about PTS, that I know a little bit about EDs, but not like the full scope. And so I'm actually pretty excited to kind of talk through this with you. So one of the things, and Shelby and I talked about this, she doesn't think there's really going to be any questions that I asked. She got a lot of the questions ahead of time that she's not going to want to answer. But whenever there's a topic like this, and she's going to tell her story in just a second, I always want to preference with whoever I'm interviewing, they don't have to answer every question. And if there's something that comes up or a question or a topic that we just need to jump over, like we're going to jump over it and it's no problem. So, and then I always warn the audience that I have two little guys here, so at any point we may get interrupted by either one of them. So that's always fun. So Shelby, can you just kind of open up and give us a brief synopsis just of your story and, give them a little bit of a heads up as to why I specifically asked you to be a part of this conversation?
Yeah, no problem. I kind of wrote down some of I could talk for a long time about my story. So yeah, I'll just give kind of the highlights.
Okay.
So yeah, my experience with eating disorders is very personal. And you heard Nicole call them EDs. Sometimes, like if you've had an eating disorder, we could refer to them as EDs. My personal story is I developed an eating disorder around the age of probably I'm gonna say like between 12 and 14.
Wow. Okay.
Diagnosed at the age of 14.
Okay.
And my eating disorder started out because there's lots of different, everyone's different. There can be some, issues can come up from anywhere. Mine specifically started, I grew up in a Christian family. There was no abuse. There was no trauma, nothing like that. So there wasn't like any like reason for me to develop an eating disorder.
Yeah.
My parents, actually, I think they're pretty much the most awesome people on the planet.
I love that.
Like even when I was going through it, I was just like, how did I end up with these parents? But I went to a small private Christian school and I was the only girl in my grade.
Okay.
And as I switched to a public school, I kind of all of a sudden, this is going to sound funny to someone in Florida, but it was there were like 80 kids in my grade. I know, that's crazy. Really funny. But yeah, and I grew up in Michigan, by the way. I grew up in rural Michigan. And so there was all these kids and I always thought, like I was a really cool kid and like people would want to hang out with me or whatever. And at the time I was not at that time. At a young age, I was a part of like ballet classes, but I was always super into basketball. Like that was my thing. Like my sport was basketball. And I started comparing myself like kind of to other basketball players, not even just as like, I don't know. I just started to like look at the other basketball players. I started to look at the other girls just walking the same hallways from me. And it's probably all in my head, but middle school. But I was like, I'm different than them and I want to fit in with them. And so my eating disorder is some eating disorders start this way where it's a product of maybe trying to look a different way. But a lot of times eating disorders can start for, like I said, like it can be trauma. It can be like a form of perfectionism. It can be a form of like controlling something in your life that you haven't been able to control before. But for me, I kind of took on like, okay, I'm only like 13, 14 years old at the time, but I want to try to lose weight. Like I want to try to fit in. And I had a couple years prior when I was 10, I had a thyroid condition where I had gained some weight as a child. So it wasn't like, so I had a little weight, but I was an athlete. I was like playing basketball, I was swimming in the summers, I was doing off-team sports, and all of a sudden, so my eating disorder developed very quickly.
Mm,
Some girls are, it takes years until anything is noticed, but I started trying to eat healthy, and it literally started as a health food kind of thing for a
yeah.
14-year-old, and it spiraled out of control within a year. I think
Mm,
I'm not gonna it can be triggering for
yeah.
some girls to talk about numbers. So I'm not going to mention the
Yeah.
amount of weight that I lost, but um, it was enough that my organs were shutting down. At
Wow.
15 years old, um,
Wow.
my parents were like, what do we do? And we had a counselor at the time because my mom recognized the signs and was like, okay, this is okay, we need help.
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah. Good for
um
your mom.
yeah, so they got us into counseling, but it wasn't an eating disorder specialist.
Okay. And
So
is that key? Is that key in this sort of situation where it has
very
to?
key.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, I can tell you stories. I mean, I literally saw a doctor last week that did not have enough information and said some very triggering things to me.
Okay.
So even doctors don't necessarily know, they don't know everything.
Yeah.
Specializing in eating disorders is very critical. The poor
Okay.
woman who tried to help me was so sweet.
Yeah. I mean, great heart, but yeah, I mean, I think that's, and I'll let you keep going, but I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing with this is one of the things, because I have a couple of friends who have battled eating disorders. And, I think one of the things is more than, man, I don't want to say more than any other, but I mean, it is one of the, disorders, mental health issues that I think have the most triggers that people don't realize. And it's like kind of maneuvering around landmines. And if you don't know which landmines not to step on, it can be very dangerous. So, okay,
That
keep
is
going.
so accurate. That is so accurate, Nicole. Like, seriously, you could talk to my husband for hours about that.
Yeah, I love it. Anyway, so you saw a counselor, wasn't going anywhere.
Wasn't going anywhere, and she said, there's a program that Shelby can go to, but she's gonna have to get a lot worse before she gets better. And so my poor
I mean,
parents.
already worse, like you had to
That
get
was
worse
probably that was probably like 2 months prior to
to the
me.
organs shutting down.
Yeah, at that point,
Okay.
I was losing so much weight in 1 week at a time that it was scary.
Yeah.
So so by the time I got to the facility, I was like, finally, I was scared at that point, and I was
Yeah.
like, I'm not really ready to let this go, but I need help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we get there, and they almost didn't let me even come because of insurance reasons.
Okay.
And I thought it was an eating disorder like clinic or whatever, but I get in and I realize that it was actually an adolescent psychiatric ward,
Wow.
like 3 hours from our home, and there was just no other options at that point. And it's like, I'm thinking I'm gonna walk into this place with only girls, and I walk in and there's guys and people are hanging out, and the first person I go up to, because I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I walk up to this like really nice looking guy, and I'm like, hey, and he's like so nice. He's like, hey, what are you in for? My name's blah blah blah. And I'm like, I have an eating disorder. I'm like thinking I'm so cool. And this little rural girl from Michigan, and I'm like, what are you in for? And he's like, oh, I'm suicidal. And I'm like, oh, like my life, like my world just opened up.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding.
So, you're only sent to the adolescent ward if you are a danger to others or a danger to yourself. So I was
Yeah.
there for 1 week outpatient, 1 week inpatient, 1 week outpatient. They said eating disorders are so common. I was a bad case. I would be back in a couple months. And they just wanted to save my insurance money for my relapse. And I was
Mm,
like, I am not into that, guys.
no,
So
that is ridiculous.
I had getting down in there. I had applied to a program called Mercy Multiplied. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I have heard about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I had applied to that program prior to going into the psych hospital, and I was accepted
Okay.
after discharged from the hospital, but they didn't at the time. I don't know how it is now. At the time, they did not have a counselor or a medical doctor on staff. Like, so you had to be a medically stable weight before you entered.
Is
Because
this based out of Nashville, but they have a few different places? Okay.
yeah.
I've done some study on this. Now they do have doctors and
Okay.
it's, if not doctors, they have physician assistants. They have a medical team now. So
Yeah, even
they,
after I arrived, a couple girls arrived who were borderline. But
yeah.
anyway, that was very triggering to me because I had to gain weight. So
Mm,
I had to gain a couple pounds to be able to get into the program. And so at that point, I turned to what the hospital was great because it refeeding. I was refed. I was like, okay, like Shelby can think again. She's not a zombie ghost.
yeah. Yeah.
But I learned a lot of really bad behaviors there.
Okay.
So this could also be triggering to someone. But after I left, after I needed to gain weight, I needed something else to control. So for a couple months before I got into the program, I was practicing self-harm
Okay.
to like kind of like counteract the weight gain.
Yes.
So I got into the program and it just changed my life. Like I like met God there in a way.
Mm,
Like I was a Christian before and I totally believe I was, but I
yeah.
just kind of like encountered God in a way. Like during my eating disorder, I was like, like I feel like I'm pushing God away. Like I'm not
Mm,
trying to, but I'm like
yeah.
pushing him away with my choices, yet I can't choose differently. So
Yes.
I kind of felt like God was kind of like maybe possibly angry at me. And I
Mm,
felt so much freedom there
mm,
that
mm,
like I was, a child of God and I learned my identity in God, which I'd known before, but not in the
yeah.
context of recovery.
Yeah.
So I did that and I also felt completely forgiven for the self-harm that I had practiced, which I did struggle with that again later.
Yeah. Yeah.
After leaving Mercy. But Mercy was a program that I believe, so I left there at 16 years old, and I count that as my spearhead into recovery. And
Okay.
that, people say, okay, like you're recovered now. Like, no, this is literally that I'm almost 29 years old. I was 16 then, and
Mm,
I've learned stuff in the last month about my recovery. I literally had a doctor's appointment a couple weeks ago where I was like, I don't think I was recovered as I thought I was.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, so
Yeah.
it's not,
Yeah.
so yeah, so
Yeah.
that's kind of my story. That's where I'm coming from. I was
Yeah.
diagnosed at 14, entered recovery at 16. So some girls struggle for literal years and years
Yes.
and years before they're diagnosed. And so,
Well, and
yeah,
I read a statistic, and thank you so much for sharing. Like, I
yeah,
really appreciate that because I know it's so personal. But what's really neat with Shelby is she's gotten different opportunities to speak into different schools and different groups and stuff. And I love that. And this is the whole purpose of Scar Stories, that you're using this scar to tell a story. And I love the tagline, like, our messes become our message. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can, if we fight for healing, and I'm a firm believer that this side of heaven, most of us are not going to be healed, like just like you said, like you're 29 still struggling. I'm 35 and I got diagnosed at what age? 26 with borderline and anxiety and depression. I'm still struggling, but we can be healthy. And
yeah,
that's the difference is, we're probably going to always have these scars, or as Paul referred to them in 2 Corinthians, thorns. We're always going to have this side of heaven. But what they allow us to do is to say, hey, look, I'm broken, I'm messed up, but look how Jesus came in and redeemed my story. And now I want to share it so that you have hope. But one of the things that I read,
can I just say something to that real quick?
yes, yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah. So one thing that Mercy taught me, and if any Mercy girls ever listen to this or whatever, that I think is so important that goes right along with that
Yeah,
is when I was at Mercy, I experienced what Mercy says transformation. You experience transformation in freedom. And I believe wholeheartedly that through the blood of Christ, through Jesus' sacrifice, I am 100% free and recovered. But I
yeah,
also live on this earth, so it's like
yes,
I have to grasp a hold of that. But I believe that I am like recovered
yeah,
because like Jesus did that for me. But that doesn't mean that there's not that like struggle, because I think that some
I love
girls
that.
have struggled with that. They're like, oh, I should just be free. Well, I'm still struggling with this, so I'm just like giving up on that whole like freedom in Christ thing. It's like, don't give up on that freedom in Christ thing, because
Yes.
you are free in Christ. You just walking that out looks differently for different people. So
I love that, Shelby. Preach.
yeah, that's what
Preach.
that's why we rely on Christ. But anyway, go to your
Yeah,
question.
no, I love that. I love that. Because yes, that is true. Like I think some people, and that happened to me. Like, so when we first got married, I just like nose dove or however you should say that, and just spiraled out of control. I was in counseling with Kevin like twice a week. And then we just got to a place where we were so desperate. We drove up to Atlanta and met with a couple for a weekend. They specialize with people in ministry. And I came back from that thinking that I was healed, that I was good, that I was everything. And so I kind of went on my way, not really, as the scriptures talk about, being mindful, that we're up against some pretty dark stuff. And so I ended up getting triggered and hitting a wall and having a terrible breakdown. And then just what you explained, that discouragement, like it didn't work. I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And having to grapple through, no, it did. I learned so many incredible truths about who I was in Christ and what he's done for me. And it's just, instead of just like being like, okay, I'm set and going on my merry way, it's like, no, just constantly reminding myself of who I am in Christ and the freedom I have, and practicing the things that I've learned in therapy. So I got back into counseling with Kevin. And so it's an ongoing, I think, to kind of sum up what you were both saying, it's an ongoing practice of remembering and doing what we already have been declared to be. So like we are free, we, have the blood of Christ who cleanse us, but we have to practice those truths and keep reminding us of those truths. As Paul says, leaning into Jesus daily, so sorry, go ahead.
It says picking up your cross daily.
Exactly.
Grasped that I was like, because if I just thought I was failing and failing and failing, and it wasn't until I grasped daily, like, okay, Jesus literally said this is going to keep coming back. So
yes, and that's what I always talk about, preaching the gospel to myself daily. And that's one reason why I am so grateful for these mental illnesses, because yes, it's a constant reminder. I need Jesus. I can't do this on my own. And when I mess up, those failures don't define me. Who he is defines me. So this is awesome. I'm like getting all excited.
I know.
So one of the stats that I read was 15 to 24-year-olds. So a 15-year-old to a 24-year-old, they have a 10 times a higher risk of dying when they are diagnosed with eating disorders, because kind of what you just said, depending on when the diagnosis happens, sometimes like for you, your organs were shutting down. And then another statistics I read, because I think a lot of times people think this is just a female thing. I don't know if you did. I think we were both talking about some study. One of the studies I read was 25% of those diagnosed with anorexia are men. Yes. And men have
I wrote down that statistic too.
Yes. And they have an even higher risk of dying because it goes undiagnosed, because people think men don't struggle with it. So I thought that was fascinating. So for those of you who are listening, who are men, like this is not just a female related issue. And then those of you who are parents with children, like this is not just an issue for girls, this is also an issue for guys. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because I think just some clarity on this will help, because I know we're going to have some parents listening to this who are going to be like, okay, because you said you grew up in a great home, and a home that believed in Jesus. So like you said, none of the reasons why we oftentimes think someone should have an eating disorder, none of those played a role in your situation. Yours just mainly came from a desire to be healthy. So then did it switch into, do eating disorders oftentimes become addictions? And is it like the addiction of control, kind of what you said? Or how did it, at what point when it switched to be something that you kind of lost control of, what was driving you to continue? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it started out is like, I want to be healthy. But honestly, what like fueled me was, and I do liken eating disorders to addictions.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't necessarily start that, and you could call it whatever you want. For some girls, an eating disorder might be more of a exercise addiction, but for me personally, and for I think a lot of girls, it can be characterized as maybe like a food addiction.
Okay.
Where I woke up in the morning, like, you go from a normal teen or preteen to all of a sudden I'm waking up, the first thing I think about is food.
Okay.
That's all I'm thinking about all day. What am I going to eat? What am I going to eat it? How am I going to keep myself from eating anything else and getting out of control? And so I think the part where it became addictive was when it started working
Yeah.
for me, because, you know,
You see results.
all of a sudden people are saying, oh my gosh, you look so great, you lost weight, which don't ever say that to a 14-year-old who's losing weight. It's probably not healthy. Like, people thought they were being nice, and
Yeah.
you know, and that's nice, but I just don't think that that's healthy. I don't think 14-year-olds need to be losing weight, especially to the magnitude that I wasn't. And people would also preface that with, they'd say, oh, but you know, you don't need to lose anymore. Like, you look
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Like, kind of stop, like, you're healthy, like, you look good. And I was like, oh yeah, I can stop whenever I want. And this is a 14-year-old saying this. And I didn't realize until a couple months later that I couldn't stop. Like, I literally, like, it was all consuming. And my first book, actually, The Kaleidoscope Girl, goes deep into like the psyche of like an eating disorder. So it's literally like having another voice in your head telling you what to do.
Wow.
So it's trying to, like, you know, and I actually my grandmother read the book a couple months ago, and she said, Shelby, I just had no idea. Like, I had no idea it was like to like live in your head. And
you're like, welcome to the carnival. Yeah, welcome to the circus. So Brian says that to me all the time. He's like, what must it like be like to live in your head? I was like, you don't want to know.
It's
Crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, but it was like having this voice telling you. And you know, I was addicted to weighing myself. I was addicted to, like, I would eat like once a day, and it would be like at 8 o'clock at night or something, and it would be like something I had thought about all day about eating. So it was like, it became controlling and it became an addiction, but it did not start that way. It kind of just spiraled. And that's where some people can go on a diet, and they can go on tons of crash diets, and they can never reach that addiction point. Where they're spiraling out of control and it becomes a mental health issue, I would say. But once again, I do want to say, I'm not a licensed counselor. This is all just my
yeah, sure. But you have the experience, so you can speak into it.
So yeah, so I would say it can definitely become addiction like.
Yeah. And I think too, like, one of the things with eating disorders that I think a lot of times we think is like that those who struggle with them just don't like food, but that's not it. You like food. You just, and that's what you said, like,
so in love with it. I mean, I would pour, like, my days were pouring over recipe books. Like, I was making like gourmet meals for my family and eating none of them. I was making desserts and bringing them places. And I mean, that was like my addiction, like, was food. It was like, it sounds weird that, like, oh, little anorexic girls in the kitchen all the time, but no, I was like cooking up a storm.
Is it because like making it and being around it was replacing eating it? Like, if you couldn't eat it, you wanted to be around it. Yeah. And I think too, so like sometimes when people think of eating disorders, they only think of anorexia, but there's bulimia, which is where you eat and then you throw up. It's also referred to, I believe, as purging. Am I correct? Is bulimia and purging the same thing?
Yeah, well, bulimia, even some anorexics can make maybe purging behaviors that aren't, but then it would be, considered bulimia. So it would be anorexic and bulimic. Bulimic, anorexia and bulimia can share some of the same things. Anorexia is commonly known as by starvation, but a lot of girls who are starving themselves for so long will then have like a binge, which is kind of what's characterized with bulimia. Bulimia is normally a binge, like someone will eat a whole gallon of ice cream and a pizza and then, you know,
throw up.
Back up.
Yeah.
Where anorexia is more like you get so starved that then you can binge. And I experienced that to a very small extent, but I never purged. I think throwing up was one of the worst things ever.
Yes, me too. So I don't know how,
I never struggled with that. But yeah, the third major eating disorder is, I wrote down, binge eating disorder, where there's no purging after binge. And then the other one that I did want to mention that I thought was a big one that I don't think a lot of people know
So let me
about is,
just, so binging is like, do you starve yourself and then you have one day where you eat whatever you want, or how does that work?
I never personally struggled with it. I think my
Okay.
understanding, and somebody else could correct me absolutely, but I think it's more of like a binging. Like I think more of
Okay.
like like where weight loss is probably like a symptom of anorexia. I'm thinking that weight gain is probably a symptom of
Okay.
binge eating disorder.
Okay. I got you. I'm
Yeah.
only asking for the parents who are listening because we're going to talk about
Yeah.
this in a second, but things for them to watch. So we'll get there in a second, but what were you about to say?
Yeah, the other one that hasn't been, I think, technically recognized by the National Eating Disorder, whatever of, but it's kind of one that you might hear about is it's called orthorexia.
Okay.
So,
Not heard of this one.
orthorexia, have you heard of this one?
I haven't. No, this is
Oh,
new. This
okay,
is
yeah.
new. Yeah, this is new.
Yeah, orthorexia is an eating disorder that's classified basically by, and once again, it's not official,
Yeah.
um, by clean eating. So fruits and veggies, like I'm not going to put a word like veganism or anything.
Yeah.
It's more than that. It's
It's
like an
extreme.
obsession with
Yes.
only putting healthy things in your body, which from the outside world, that would look really
Yeah.
healthy, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it can come to a place where that is where healthy eating can actually be classified in a sense as an eating disorder too.
Mm, mm.
So,
And I think it's just one of those things, scripture talks about everything in moderation. And I think it's just one of those things where anything taken to an extreme, and even as I'm listening, so like I was always a very chunky teenager and was oftentimes made fun of by my friends, but everyone just thought it was good, good fun. And so they'd make fun of how chunky I was. And if I asked for like a roll at dinner, you don't need any more rolls, just things like that. And so when we got married, I would say probably close to 6 or 7 months in, I was feeling out of control with everything. Well, I started working out and counting calories and losing a lot of weight. And I was doing it healthily because I was eating. But I also saw how it did become for me, not so much, I don't know that I'd say an addiction, but it what happened is my self-worth got tied to what the scale said.
yeah.
And so even to this day, I mean, we're 10 years away from that. And I've had 4 kids and my pregnancies, I mean, it's no secret, mama gets big, and I lose a lot of the weight at the end. But even now, like I'm probably about 20 pounds heavier than I was at my smallest weight before Brooke, which was really small. It was small. And so, but I still struggle, if I can just be honest, with like tying my self-worth to a number on the scale. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know that that would be considered an eating disorder, but I can see how it could quickly, if I wasn't watching it and being aware of it, could spiral that way because of like feeling like, okay, even though I feel great and I feel like I look good, like, and I think a lot of, you know, especially as women, but feeling comfortable in our own skin is a big deal. But then when I look at the scale, I'm like, I'm not where I want to be. So I shouldn't feel great and I shouldn't. And it's just so crazy how we let ourselves get lied to, or we compare ourselves to craziness that we see on TV and things like that. But one of the things that I want us to talk about real quickly is I was writing down stuff as you were talking. That's why I'm looking down at my notes. What are some things? So for parents who are watching this, or maybe even for like spouses who are watching this, that they're like, okay, I am a little bit concerned. What are some things that people should be watching for that are like telltale signs that like maybe someone's struggling and just not admitting it, and we won't say in every case, but like what would maybe be some things to just kind of be aware of?
Yeah, that's super tricky because I would say and I think most people can recognize this, like society at large practices eating disorder behaviors. Like
Explain that, because that is an intriguing statement.
yeah, so our whole structure of society is based around thinner is better.
Mm,
Um, health food, like there's bad foods, there's things that we should avoid, there's things like we're bad if we eat it, like you should never have a McDonald's sandwich, like
yeah,
things like that,
yeah.
like where and I think even as a 14-year-old in rural Michigan in the 2000s, those messages were being, I was seeing them.
Ingrained. Yeah.
I don't even know. We didn't even have cable TV. I don't even know. But they were. Those things were ingrained in my head. Like thinner is better. Like carbs are bad. Like whatever it is, like you have to exercise XYZ. And if you don't look like this person who exercises, you're probably not exercising enough. You're not doing the right things.
Yeah.
So it's tricky because like even what you described, like that wasn't, and it becomes an eating disorder, I think, when it becomes disordered, like can you then go about your daily life without this thing controlling? Like, can you skip a workout, and okay, can somebody bring cake to the office for a birthday party and you not freak out about your diet, like things like that. Like once those things start happening, then I think that's where it becomes like disordered, it's like an issue, because now you're like, you're putting that above your life. You're putting that above enjoying life. So
it's so interesting what you said. Like, you're so right, because society has so many people talk about unhealthy relationships with food, and you're just so right. Like society, like McDonald's is bad, or this is bad, or things like that, and it keeps us from. I had a friend reach out to me, and she was like, when she worked for a really unhealthy organization, Christian organization, believe it or not, which is, anyways, that's a whole other topic. But she was the thinnest she'd ever been. She was like a stick figure because she was under so much stress and so much pressure. And they also touted like making sure you looked good and all this other stuff. And then when she left the organization, she started like dealing with her stress and just feeling this freedom. And so started just enjoying food and traveling and trying different things. And so she gained, she gained some weight. And now she's, I think what she said was the heaviest she's ever been. But when I remember her from college, homegirl was thin. So I can't imagine what the heaviest of her ever being, is. And so she had reached out to me. She's just like, well, what do I do? And I was like, I think you've got to get to the place where you're healthy, but at the same, like, you need to be healthy, because we can take it to an extreme where we can become gluttonous, and that's not good for any, like, being anorexic is not good for your organs, and being gluttonous isn't good for your organs. But finding a place in between where you are healthy, but then also just enjoying your life. And see, I think that's what sucks in this society is, even for us, like every Friday we take the kids out to get ice cream. Well, some days I have some and some days I don't. And the kids notice that, like, Mommy, why are you not eating ice cream? And I think even just coming to the place where like I'm comfortable in my own skin, I'm healthy, but I'm also, maybe I'm not going to be like the teeny tiny version I was before I had kids, because yes, I'm enjoying the birthday cake. I'm enjoying the ice cream. I'm, what I'm saying? And just getting a better relationship with food and enjoying our lives, because scripture talks about like eat, drink, and be merry, and we're missing out on, a segment of that because we're so stressed, and then that triggers emotions, and then that triggers, so then, it's great, the guilt and everything else.
Yeah. It's just, there's not, I think the price of our mental health, like the even reason that you're doing this thing, like the price of our mental health, like it's not worth it. Like is skipping if you really don't want ice cream, don't eat ice cream, but like if you want it or something, it's like, is the price of skipping that worth like the memories with your family, or someone in that situation, is it really worth it? I saw some Instagrammer put something up the other day that was like, skinny will not be on your tombstone, like, something like that. And another quote that I recently saw, not mine, somebody said something like, you can't hate your body to a place to love your body. Like, you can't hate your body to a place of love. Like, you can't, like, I keep whenever somebody close to me says, oh, I'm trying to lose weight, I'm like, why? Like, why are you trying to lose weight? And they'll say, oh, I just need to, like, why? Like, because I am a firm believer in love. Like, you're never gonna love your body then if you don't love your body now. So if you love who you are and your body. And I struggle with this. Like I'm preaching it, but this is
Yeah,
hard.
yeah.
This is not like an easy thing.
Yeah.
So like if you so this is what I personally work on is love my body at every single stage, because if you get to that stage, you're not going to love your body then, because
Yeah.
you're still going to be striving for something that is either one, not what your body was ever meant to look like, because you can do research on I don't know the exact scientific word, but it might be like metabolic weight or something. Like everyone's body is actually like meant to be like at a certain weight. Like even if you diet and then you go off the diet, your body will go back to that weight. Like it's a weight that your body is like happy at.
Yeah.
Not everybody's body is going to be happy at the same
Yeah.
shape,
Yeah.
So, and even girls, I think it's important, which I recently learned this. Maybe it could be just an internet whack thing or whatever, but I've read recently that some of the reasons girls don't get the flat stomach they always want is because, girl, your uterus is there. Like,
yeah. And after you've had a certain number of kids, it just doesn't always go back. So, yeah.
And that's natural, like that's normal. So one thing that I did think about where you're saying that too is like talking about foods. And I recently thought about this, like talking about foods with our kids even. I think it's important that kids know, like obviously, some people scoff at like, oh, don't tell your kid that sugar is bad. Like, no, don't let your kid eat sugar all day. But I think there's a way to like talk about it. That's
yes.
Like,
so it's not, and this is what our society does. We want everything lumped, because if you can categorize and label things, it's much easier to like, so we want it good and we want it bad. You know what I'm saying? So and like is bad, sugar bad, vegetables good.
Damaging. That can be so damaging. So I thought recently I thought of a way to talk about a kid, even like about sugar or something, like, okay, we're talking about proteins, like these make our muscles strong, these help us grow, these build our cells, fruits and vegetables, those give us the nutrients and the vitamins we need. You talk about like a cookie or donut, well, those are the foods that make us smile,
yes. Like I love that. Like I love that.
It's not a bad thing. It's something you still need. But we just learn how to, as we grow,
phrase it.
We learn how to handle it. And there's different phases of recovery for that too. Like, so
yeah. Well, yeah, geez. And I this conversation, we probably need to wrap it up soon, because we're coming up on almost an hour. It's like time flies when you're having fun. But one of the things I just want to let those of you know who maybe don't battle with an ED is just the trigger warnings and being aware. And it's funny because I put up a post a couple of weeks ago about, my weight loss journey, and you made a comment like, I'm glad you said trigger warning, because there was something, like, or you said something about you were triggered.
Yeah.
And I think even just, I think realizing that people, and I think this is in every walk of life, but just realizing people around us have struggles we don't know about, and just being sensitive about those things. And I don't know, I feel like this has been really eye-opening for me, and even freeing for me in some ways. Like that statement that you said you had heard, you can't hate your body to a place of love. Like, I'm like, dang, I wrote that down. Like that hit me, so, and I just think, yes, being careful of how we speak to our children, being careful of how we speak to our friends. And I guess too, Shelby, and I maybe want to end on this, just the comparison situation. So like this happens with men and women. Like it's easy to walk around. One of the reasons why, it'd be really easy to not struggle with anything if we just lived, if we just stayed in COVID lifestyle our whole lives and stayed in the house and never went there.
Yeah.
But, we're out and about. A lot of us are getting back out again. And some of us gained some weight through COVID. Some of us lost some weight through COVID. Some of us stayed the same. But how do you mentally go about not comparing yourself with someone? Or, is it just one of those things where you just celebrate, like, wow, my friend lost some weight, like good for her, she looks awesome. How do you keep yourself from not feeling bad about that, or vice versa? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do we Because for me, honestly, and I've heard this happens a lot, like especially when it comes to weight, it almost becomes a power play where you walk into the room. I know this happens with women. I don't know if this happens as much with men, but you walk into the room and you scan it and you figure out where you kind of are almost on the weight scale. And it's like, okay, I'm one of the smallest people here, so I can have a bunch of confidence, or I'm one of the biggest people here, so I feel smaller. You know what I'm saying? Like this happens to us psychologically. So how do we fight against that? You know what I'm saying? Like, do you have any insight? I'm working through it in my own mind.
I would say that sounds like that specific analogy sounds kind of like just sounds like in a sense like distorted, like because you're not,
Yeah.
but that is so hard. And the first thing that comes to mind is such a Bible book answer, and it's really hard because it's like like you don't want to just like slap a band-aid on or something, but it's really not. Like when you look at like who God created us to be, it's like so like comparing my story, my journey, my race, my body, my
Wow.
life with hers and this is something I've been struggling with a lot lately.
Yeah.
It's like comparing in any avenue of life is taking away from your uniqueness.
Wow.
I
I'll
mean,
write that down. Yeah. That is so good. I'm writing that down.
I mean, it's taking away, like we were not meant to have the platform that somebody else had, to have the body that they had.
Yes.
Like, we're meant to be us, and then that's where we lose ourselves so much in this society, is we get so caught up in it. We get so caught up in the looks, and it's like it's so difficult because sometimes I have to stop myself and I have to be like, why do I care?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Why do I even care? Like this has no
Mm.
um no part, this is no part of my eternity.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
not this will not, like, my big thing is loving people. Ever since I met all those teens in the psych ward, I have been naturally drawn towards hurting people.
I love that.
And it's like my platform is not,
Yeah.
I don't want to be about that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not about me, because when we make it about us, we're taking away from what we could be giving to somebody else.
Yes. I'm
And
jotting all this down. When we make it about us. I love that. I
and
love
I'm
it.
coming up with this on the spot, I tell you.
It's so good. We take away from someone else. And then can you mention the books that you've written in case people want to find them?
Yeah. First of all, yeah, I talk a lot about like body image and stuff, where I try to kind of share my journey on Instagram. So that's where I share about my books a
And
lot.
where can they follow you on Insta?
Shelbie May Live Loved, and Shelbie with an IE.
I'll link it to this too, so people can,
So
yeah.
no biggie. My first book is called The Kaleidoscope Girl. It's available on Amazon. And that one is a fiction narrative. I actually wrote it. It takes place during Hurricane Irma
Okay.
in Florida, which is kind of, I wanted some sort of fun, like
Yeah.
external force that was also battling against the internal eating disorder force. So
Yeah.
it's just really about like about recovery. But even like I said, my grandma read it and she was like, wow, that was eye-opening. So like somebody with an eating disorder will hopefully find a lot of hope in it, but somebody without an eating disorder will also kind of be like, oh well, that was eye-opening. Like I was not only entertained, I hope, but I also like learned something. And my other book is called Girls Like Me. I don't even have them, they're all around on the shelf.
Hilarious.
The other one is called Girls Like Me, and I was originally written for like Velocity girls. It goes through
and Velocity is just the student ministry at our church.
Student ministry is Centerpoint. And it was written for girls ages, I would say even 16 to like 30. Like put like a larger age range on that one. And it's really made for girls, to help girls read their Bible every day, because I encountered so many girls who are like, I'm a Christian, I love God. I'm like, okay, like how do you read your Bible? Talk about that. Oh, well, I don't. Well, why not? Well, it's too boring, it's too hard, I don't understand it, I can't relate it to my life. I took some Bible stories of biblical women, and I not flipped them, but I related them to to us today.
Yes.
So that is
I have to get both those books.
Yeah. So that one is actually free on Amazon because I said,
Okay.
16-year-olds aren't going to be able
Yeah.
to purchase this, and I want this to
Yeah.
be a resource for them specifically. And so on Amazon and Nook, that
Okay.
is
Okay.
Amazon Kindle and Nook, that is free. There is a charge for the paperback copy.
Okay.
But yeah, those are my 2 books right now, and I'm always
Love
working
that.
on more books, so there will be more.
I love it. I love it. Well,
But
Shelby, I really appreciate your time. And, if you guys have any more questions or want to reach out to her, I know Shelby is always willing to continue the dialogue. So
absolutely.
I'm not sure where this is going to hit people, but I know this is going to be powerful. Like I can feel it in my bones. So anyways, I really appreciate it, Shelby. Thank you so much for your time. And again, you guys, if you ever need any more resources or questions or concerns, or if something triggered you and you're struggling, please reach out to either Shelby or I. And
Or check out the National Eating Disorder Association
love it.
website.
Love
And
it.
they also have a screening tool on there. So if you or
Okay.
somebody you think might have an eating disorder, you can actually take the screening test and
I love that.
see if that's even maybe an issue in your life. So.
Yeah. And just to speak into Mercy Multiplied, I had looked into it for someone that I was close to, and they've done, in the past couple of years, they've got doctors and licensed counselors and a ton of people on staff. It's a nonprofit, so it is actually free, but you do have to apply and go through several interviews to get in. So if you are looking for resources, it's not just for EDs, it's for any.
They they say anyone with life controlling issues, addictions,
Yes.
eating disorders, abuse. They're helping sex trafficking victims now.
Yes.
Anything. I met girls there who, just having anxiety,
Yeah.
anger issues, unplanned pregnancies. They also
Yeah.
have
I love
a
it.
program for that, and they also have adoption services for unplanned pregnancies.
And they have several, I think 3 different locations now. So anyways, there's some resources, but love you guys. Thanks so much for joining in, and we will see you next time for Scar Stories. I can't get it.